This edition of Wyoming Portraits is proudly sponsored by Eastside Homes in Casper. Eastside Homes is Central Wyoming's premier dealer for Schultz modular homes. For quality, service, and the best value for your money, visit with the professionals at Eastside. And welcome home. Eastside Homes, located just past the main post office on Forest Drive in Casper.
I'm from Casper originally, born in Casper, and even as a little kid, as I was growing up, I always sought out any kind of novels I could find that were set in Wyoming or written about Wyoming. And we used to ride my bike from east side of Casper to the library downtown, and the librarians there kind of they enjoyed seeing a young boy show up who wanted to read. And they took good care of me, and they made sure that they would feed me books, challenge me, with new ones, different subject matter. I think the first series I ever read was Encyclopedia Brown, and the librarians made a point of getting all of those books from other libraries so I could read them. And even at that time, I thought I might want to be a writer, although I didn't know of what, whether it was a novel or whatever. But I do remember going into the shelves at the library and into where the bees are to figure out where my book would be if it was ever there. But that was years before anything happened. Reading a lot of books that were set in the Mountain West or in Wyoming, it bothered me how often Wyoming and the residents of Wyoming were portrayed. There were a lot of those books, although maybe beautifully written, were written by people who had maybe vacationed here or driven through or just moved to Jackson Hole or something like that. And there was always kind of a sense of an outsider kind of perspective. And I thought that they often portrayed characters in Wyoming as having Southern accents and saying things that I'd never heard anybody say, because Casper at that time, like it is now, is kind of a go-go city. It's a, leading in energy development. It's not a slow, rural, southern town. And I thought if I ever wrote a book, I would try to make it more reflective of the people and the culture that I knew in Wyoming and in Casper. And if nothing else, I hope that readers in Wyoming and in the Mountain West would read it and say, yes, it's authentic to the place. So that's always been a very important goal of mine, and I hope I still do it. There's a lot of, throughout the novels, there's a lot of people and places and things depicted that are very, very true to Wyoming, and sometimes some pretty nasty people. But I think the goodness and the culture of Wyomingites comes through, and they're not all rubes who speak in Southern accents. I went to high school at Kelly Walsh High School, and I was the editor of the Kelly Call newspaper, which was kind of that. I realized then that's kind of where my writing life was likely to go, was journalism. And I loved being the editor. We won some great national awards, and because of those, I was offered a journalism scholarship at the University of Denver. And so I went there instead of Laramie for the reason of the scholarship. I majored in mass communications, which is journalism, and my first job out of college was as a reporter on the Saratoga Sun newspaper in Saratoga. And I was there for 2 years as just kind of the general reporter, outdoors, sports, everything. And that's one thing I've found since, that the greatest training ground ever for a novelist is probably to be a newspaper reporter at a small town newspaper, because you're involved in everything. You meet all strata, and you meet I met billionaires and I met survivalists, and a lot of those people and issues that I covered then I still use in the novels, but also the kind of small town intensity that there is, where a lot of people with different agendas have to eat at the same cafe every morning. It creates a different kind of structure. And it was at that time when I first started thinking about writing a novel. It's before the black-footed ferrets were discovered in Meeteetse, and I don't know if people remember back then, but there used to be wanted posters up all over Wyoming. If you see this creature, call this number. And what was so fascinating to me as a reporter was that when the ferrets were discovered, it was not a well-kept secret in Meeteetse that a lot of people knew they were there all along, but nobody made that call because they knew what kind of impact that would bring to the area, and it did. But I thought that was such a fascinating thing, that a big, well-meaning piece of legislation like the Endangered Species Act would create such strange agendas and directions on the ground when it was implemented. So I started writing the novel then, and I didn't set out to write a game warden series. I never thought the world needs a game warden series. I wanted to tell a story about this endangered species find, and when I first started writing it, the protagonist was a sheriff and then a newspaper reporter, which is what I was, but I wanted my guy to be able to take action within the book. So as a reporter, I was doing ride-alongs with the local game warden, and I realized this is the best guy to carry this story, because a game warden in Wyoming would be involved in that issue, very involved. And plus their lifestyle was so interesting to me, in that there's only 50 of them in the state. They live in state-owned homes. They generally don't have backup when they're in the field because they're too far out. They're heavily armed. They also have to deal with situations in that, even unlike an inner-city cop, almost everybody they encounter is armed. You know, no other law enforcement has those same situations. And that seemed like the perfect kind of protagonist for me for this book. And I named him Joe Pickett. In my mind, he is a Wyoming game warden. He's not an actor, and he's not based on any particular game warden or anybody. I consider him very kind of iconic Western type, in that he's very steadfast. He tries to do the right thing. He screws up sometimes. He loves his wife and kids. He doesn't make a lot of money, but once he gets into a situation, he always sees it through, and that's probably the one characteristic that carries him from book to book. The first book, when Joe Pickett is introduced, he's in his mid-20s. He's naive. He's not the sharpest knife in the drawer. He's certainly not the kind of guy who is best with his fists or with his guns. And over the years, he's still Joe Pickett, but because of so many things that he's gone through, so many betrayals, so many big kind of adventures, he's got a little harder bark than he used to on him, but he still has the same attributes. He still tries to do the right thing. He still gets himself in trouble by going into areas that people warn him not to go, but he maintains his sense of duty, and he loves his wife and kids, and he loves the state of Wyoming. Mystery, crime, police procedural kind of series that are kind of where my genre is. It usually involves some kind of cop or PI or detective who's got a lot of baggage. They're generally single, sometimes alcoholic, very much loners. And from the very first book, I intentionally tried to make Joe Pickett a different kind of guy. Not only is he state employee, loves his wife and has kids, but the family is a very integral part of every book. In fact, in some books, big major plot lines are actually told from the point of view of Joe's wife, Mary Beth, or his daughters. And because I think I like to write from a child's point of view, and like to try to write from a female point of view in terms of just the craft of that, but also because having grown up or aged in a family with all females, I have a pretty good idea how they might take, what their take on things might be. But the one thing I do when I do write from either of those perspectives, or write about a 13-year-old girl's daily life, is I always run that by my daughters before I ever send it anywhere, to say, does this ring true to you? Would a 13-year-old say this way? And they always set me straight, and a lot of times correct the dialogue to something that's more realistic to that age. But I think that's one reason why I do have a lot of women readers, is because of the family aspect of the books, and because Joe Pickett isn't necessarily just a loner out there driving around with his dog and his guns.
You tend to think that the appeal wouldn't extend very much beyond here in Wyoming, and that it would be largely because Joe Pickett is with Fish and Game, that it would largely appeal to men, and largely men who hunt. But that's not the case. I find there are just as many women readers who are looking for the next Chuck Box to come out.
SADDLESTRING doesn't really exist as a real town, although it is a location. It's the post office on the H.F. Barr Ranch. And when I was first working on the book, I went there and I saw, SADDLESTRING, Wyoming post office, fell in love with the name, and decided to use it for my fictional town where Joe Pickett lives out of. And in my mind, the community of SADDLESTRING is located about where Story, Wyoming is. And it consists of equal parts Sheridan, Buffalo, and Saratoga. And I'm always getting questions from people about the real SADDLESTRING, and they want to know why I named the county 12 Sleep County instead of 10 Sleep County. That always comes up. But a lot of the locations in the books, in the Bighorns, are real locations, but just as many are fictional. And if anybody, and there are people who've tried to kind of take the Joe Pickett tour around Wyoming, and they get hopelessly lost, because I'll mix in both fictional and real places as Joe drives around. But I do take pains that if I really name a town, such as in Free Fire, it's in Yellowstone Park, in Out of Range, it's Jackson Hole, I try to be as true to that community or that area as I can if I actually mention it. But it took 20 years from inception to publication. And in that time, I was involved in a lot of things. Worked for the state of Wyoming for a while in tourism development. Started my own company, ran it for 24 years up until fairly recently, promoting the state of Wyoming and other western states in Europe and Australia and Scandinavia. But my dream always was this novel. And finally, in 2001, it was published. It had the title Open Season, and everything that wasn't supposed to happen with the first novel did happen with that. It was a New York Times notable book, went into multiple printings. It won more Best First Novel awards than any novel to date, and it was optioned for a movie by Bruce Willis. Everything happened. So I kind of entered with a bang after this 20 years of struggling to get this thing published. And then when it was so well received, the publisher then offered a contract with 2 more books with Joe Pickett as the protagonist, and that's how the series was born. I've been writing 1 book a year since. That's the contract. Just completed the 14th in the series, and now these books are no longer obscure. The new one debuted at number 3 on the New York Times 2 weeks ago, and it's still in the top 10 at week 2. So it interests me that so many issues that I consider very Wyoming issues resonate all over the country, and now all over the world. They're in 27 languages now. Yeah, whereas all the Joe Pickett books, all 14 of them, are set in Wyoming because he's a Wyoming game warden. There's some ideas that I've got. Once I've got them, I've got to write the book, and they're not always set in Wyoming. So I do standalones, and they're never in the state. The first one, Blue Heaven, was in Idaho. That book went on to win the Edgar Award for Best Novel in 2008, which really did mean a lot of big things for me in terms of sales and new foreign markets, that kind of thing. And it was fun to write in a different style than Joe Pickett. And then I wrote a couple more. One set in Colorado called 3 Weeks to Say Goodbye. One set in Yellowstone Park in Montana named Back of Beyond. And then I had one called The Highway that came out just last summer. That's a really scary book about a serial killer, long-haul truck driver. Totally different than the Joe Pickett series, totally different characters. But it allows me to try new things as a writer and stretch in different directions. But also, there are certain readers that just don't want to read a series, and certain readers who are intimidated by a series with 14 books. They don't really know if they want to commit to starting it, and they'll often buy a standalone first and read it, and if they like the subject matter and the style, then they'll start the series. It's almost like a gateway drug into the series, and I hear from readers all the time that the first book they read was a standalone, and then they went into the series. There's subject matter that just is not suitable for Joe Pickett or wouldn't work for Joe Pickett, and that's where I can do the standalone. So I actually have two different publishers, one for the series and one for the standalones.
There's a harder edge to some of those. Blue Heaven is a true standalone in that it's set in Idaho. It gets its title from the Coeur d'Alene area is considered Blue Heaven among retired law enforcement personnel from California. When you get into the subsequent volumes, 3 Weeks to Say Goodbye, Back of Beyond, and The Highway, you find a recurrent character of the name Cody Hoyt. And those books definitely have a harder edge than the Joe Picketts. They're a little more bleak, a little darker, but still he writes in those a very convincing, in-depth mystery that's very well done.
And even though there's a lot of different ways to publish books now, with e-books and self-publishing and all of that, if someone wants to really go the commercial route and work, with a New York publisher and maybe become a commercial success or literary success, there still is only one way, and that's through New York, through the major publishers there. And that usually starts by with an agent, a literary agent who's agreed to represent the writer and who takes it from editor to editor. And then when the book is published, all bets are off. It's either sinks or swims on its own, and every author is only as successful as their last book, pretty much. But luckily, I've been kind of blessed in that I've had great editors at both publishers who are very supportive, who are actually fans of the books, and very influential. And they've been able to make it so that the books are well promoted, well placed. Each book has outsold the last book since I've started, so the trajectory is still going the right way. And as long as that is, I'm lucky enough to be, one of the few hundreds or so, writers in the country that can make a living from publishing only. One thing that I always wondered about growing up, when I talked about the fact that I used to read anything written about Wyoming, but there at that time, it's not like now, there were really no iconic Wyoming literary writers. No one, like in Montana, they had A.B. Guthrie, but no one would ever say, there weren't any famous Wyoming novelists. There are now. But I always wondered if I was successful as a novelist, if Wyomingites would read the books like, for example, they do in the South, where they really embrace their local writers. And what I found is that yes, Wyoming people are big readers, and the numbers of books that are sold in Wyoming of mine are incredible. And even the publisher has remarked, and one time called and asked me, said, how many people live there? And I said about 600,000. And they said, my God, everybody there has bought every book. And that's been very heartening, that as I go around the state, no matter where I'm at, and all walks of life, are people who read these books. And I think that's a credit to Wyoming, that there's so many readers. And I want to keep them, keep them entertained and keep them in the fold, and that's been fun. I try never to complain about going on book tours, because I realize that there's an awful lot of authors out there who don't have the kind of support I do from the publisher, the push and the marketing money that they put together to put together a book tour around the country. And what a book tour is showing up at either libraries or bookstores or different venues, and usually reading for a few minutes and then answering questions from readers and then signing a lot of books. And my typical book tour will be 2 to 3 weeks long, all across the U.S., different city every night, sometimes 2 venues a day, constant travel. It's not like I'm not Taylor Swift going around in a bunch of buses. It's just me flying from place to place. I mentioned that because she was at a hotel I was at last year, and it was me and my carry-on suitcase and her 6 semis to do her show. But it's a way, it's a great way to meet readers, to get impressions from people, to kind of figure out who my readers are, and but it is very wearing. Spending that much time in airports and on airplanes and in rental cars does start to wear you down, but it always wakes me back up when I show up at the event and meet readers. And what's always interesting to me is how many, no matter where I'm at, have some kind of Wyoming connection, and they want to come up and tell me that their dad was a rancher here, or they used to live in Powell, or something. They vacation here now. It's just as interesting to me to meet people. Like I met a couple in Sheridan last night who moved to Sheridan because of the books, and have been there now for 4 years. And I meet a lot of people who come to Wyoming because they've read descriptions of it in the books, and that just always, I always enjoy that. And I enjoy meeting readers who are not normally mystery or novel readers, like 14, 15-year-old boys and a lot of retired men who have never read much, but now that they have the chance and they found something they like, they're the most loyal of all the fans. And so the readership's about 50-50 men and women across all ages, and that's unusual in this business.
Long before I became a bookseller, I came across C.J. Box's first book, which was Open Season, about Joe Pickett set here in Wyoming. And anything that I find that's set in Wyoming, I generally will pick up and read, and thoroughly enjoyed it. And then a number of years later, found myself a bookseller with a bookstore, and have continued to enjoy his Joe Pickett series as well as his non-series books that he's written. He's really made quite a name for himself and for the state of Wyoming. He's known throughout the country. Anytime I travel to meetings around the country with meetings among booksellers, they want to know, do you have C.J. Box? Do you carry his books? They're set in Wyoming. And I say, well, yes, that we do. I have had booksellers in San Francisco beg me for his contact information because they're huge fans of his writing and would like to have him come out and do book signings. His appeal reaches all the way to France. He's won, on several occasions, has won the French Grand Prix for the work that he's written with the Joe Pickett series. Well, I think part of it is just the mystery of Wyoming. It's the least populous state in the Union. It's the state that people across the country know the least about. There's still a little bit of that cowboy mystique to it. The independence. Joe Pickett is a fiercely independent character who acts according to his principles. I think that has tremendous appeal across the board for people. I think they're interested in learning a little more about Wyoming and about the people of Wyoming. On a personal level, he's quite engaging as a speaker. He is very eager to please. He's a gentle and kind person who I think no one is more surprised about the success of his series than he is. He is just happy to be as popular as he is. He's happy to be able to have time to sit back and write his books, but he's exceedingly humble about his popularity and how well he's done.
I'm going to continue doing what I do right now. I'm going to continue writing at least a book a year. Some years 2 come out. There's still a lot of stories that I've got out in front of me that I know I want to tackle. I do want to try some other kinds of standalones at some point. Maybe even a historical Western set in the Mountain Man period is something I've always been interested in. But you know, if you're a writer, you write. And that's when I'm the happiest is when I'm working on a book. And between books, I start getting nervous. So I'm just going to keep doing it. It's a great job. I don't have to go into an office or do anything. It's something I enjoy as much as I can think of, and it allows me and my family to try new things, go places. A lot of doors open as the success grows. I get access for fishing all over the state of Wyoming now. It's great. So I'm just going to continue on and doing what I like to do, and hopefully readers will hang with me. Well, he gets a little older in every book, so there'll eventually be a time when it doesn't make sense for him to be out, riding the range in his pickup truck. But luckily, that's still quite a long ways away. He's in the series. He's about 50 years old now, so he's got quite a few years to go before it's impractical. And I don't want to have one of those series where we just suspend time and the characters never age or change. When the end is, when the stopping point is there, that'll be there, and I'll be happy with that.
Well, it's always very rewarding when you see someone who is born and raised here in Casper who's successful at whatever endeavor they've chosen. I don't think that he necessarily set out as a teenager to be a writer, but he has certainly done it extremely well. It's always interesting when he comes home and you do a book signing with him, because people come out of the woodwork who grew up with him. His family still lives here in town. His mom's still here. Even my partner was tutored when he was in elementary school many years ago by Chuck's father. So their ties to Wyoming and to Casper go way back, even though Chuck now resides down in Cheyenne. But we still consider him a hometown boy, and it's exciting to be a part of his success.